talking, this might be one of the most important videos you've ever seen, spirituality ever, because it'll detail a lot of overcoming things that we encounter in daily life, which actually are almost, I wouldn't say trials, but things that when we overcome, it really puts us on the path. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, we'll look at a few questions here. We're talking about the Church of Smyrna, which of course is a church in Revelation 2 to be precise. So, what is the cage? Let's start with that. The cage is where the adversary, sometimes known as Lucifer, Satan, the devil, I'm just going to use the term adversary because essentially the adversary means the one who is against the harmonious creator, right? Or the vibe created by the creator. So a lot of those different names have, it's sometimes referred to that they're different beings or whatever, so we're not going to get into that. We're just going to call it the adversary. And it's talked about in Revelation also, that during the last dust up upstairs, the first battle in heaven, basically Michael is the one who cast the adversary into the bottomless pit. It said that the angel who came with the key and the key and chains to the bottomless pit. So it doesn't mention the angel's name, but of course we know that it is Michael, because Michael is the strongest archangel, strongest angel in general, and he is the one who has the flaming sword, which we'll get into a bit later. But we'll talk about here. He's said that he sealed him in the bottomless pit, and that he would be imprisoned for 1,000 years. And this is not a literal time of 1,000 years, 1,000 years, 1,000 years, but it's a metaphorical time period, essentially meaning that he's in prison for a long time, and when that time is up, then he will walk, he will be free. So this is kind of referring to stuff where we'll get into a bit later. But and this is to be clear, this is not an actual time that will occur rather on the earth, but will occur inside like our soul. So it will occur relative to an individual based on what they're doing in their life. So the Church of Smyrna is relevant to the cage because it's the church related to human emotions, as we see here, overcoming sexual desires, things like sex or drugs, or addictions, fears. Those are all really related to the Church of Smyrna, and these like lower instincts that derive a lot of things in the two-dimensional world. So even things like gluttony and stuff like that, in terms of like eating or any kind of like emotional or sensual pleasure which can be overindulged in. I'm not saying sex is like a sin in itself. I'm saying that the way it can be overindulged in is a sin. So if you're somewhat familiar with a lot of the terms in the 21st century, there's things like sex can relate to which are actually good, like, and you utilize for higher purposes, like having romantic relations with your twin flame or your soulmate, right? So your partner, this is a type of like sex that serves a higher purpose. Also, even like they say sometimes, like, oh, jerking off is a sin. Jerking off is not a sin. It's that the addiction to it and it being not utilized for a higher purpose is the sin. So like things like edge maxing, seed retention, all that kind of stuff is things that are related to jerking off, but it's serving a higher purpose. It's utilized for some kind of actual benefit, and it's intentionally used. This is the thing, it's utilized with intention. So overcome sexual desires, because these are really all spawning from the adversary and demons and these lower planes of existence. We'll spin around in a bit and look at what's on the other side of the board in a second. But these are all related to the Church of Smyrna because that relates to that like relates to like water, which is tied to sexuality, um, which is also tied to the moon. Like if you didn't know this, each of the 7 churches in Revelation are tied to a planetary sphere. And the Church of Smyrna is tied to the moon, which, as we can see here, is tied to cycles, temporal, limbo, emotions. So all of these kind of basic things within a human being, but not the actual higher churches, which relate to more of the divine. So I'll spin around here and we'll look at these. So we can, maybe I'll get to this in a second actually. I just want to finish up here, but the Church of Smyrna is like there's multiple churches, of course, in Revelation. Pergamos is the one above Smyrna, which is almost like it's related to fire, and it's that state where you're transcending into the spiritual realms. So it's even said that relating to the Church of Pergamos, that it is where Satan's seat is, but it is the church related to the Archangel Michael and Mercury, hence the name of the channel. So essentially, when you overcometh, he overcometh, or when you conquer those desires in the lower planes, you transcend yourself to these higher levels, like Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, all these higher centers, and of course building on the foundation of Ephesus and Smyrna, and then going to those churches. But the point is that they're straight, they're in alignment. So I'm not going to go into the connotation of straight in relation to sex or anything like that. But straight nonetheless, make your line straight in terms of the energy flow. And that's all I get into really around that. So of course, as I said before, he's said to be in prison for 1,000 years, the adversary, the apocalypse. The apocalypse is a time when he walks from the cage, and the apocalypse is not a time that will actually set upon the earth as much as it is a time within the development of a human being. So when you're overindulgent in all these things, that is essentially the apocalypse, because the energy within your spiritual system is running wild, and comes the horsemen, fiery skies, red oceans, fiery skies, the greatest hits, right? So we'll spin around here and we'll look at the other side of the board. So we have the dimensions over here. 1D is related to the element of earth, 2D element of water, 3D element of fire, and the cage is around these dimensions. And the emotional plane, which again is tied to the Church of Smyrna, is tied to the lower astral, because it involves those lower desires, right? So when you transcend them, you move again to the higher churches. So the thing about like this is that why is Satan's seat said to be a Pergamos, even though the cage is at the lower centers? It's because demons are made from fire, but they're also killed or smited by fire. As I talked about or mentioned earlier, Michael is the archangel who possesses the flaming sword. And the flaming sword is the thing that can basically beat the adversary and beat or smite demons. So it's an instrument of heaven and divine will. So again, when you move this energy from the lower centers, like in Smyrna, to the higher centers like Pergamos and Thyatira is especially relevant because what is it said in that passage? He who has eyes like unto a flame of fire, basically referring to Pergamos, because the wind is the next highest element, which is related to Thyatira. And what is said about the church of Thyatira? It said that their sin is that they tolerated that woman Jezebel, who is, I guess you can infer what is meant in that passage. She's, somebody who, basically sleeps around, and she practices sexual immorality, whatnot. So, this factor is something that typically ties to, again, like we said, you not ascending into those higher planes and connecting to that church, Thyatira. And Thyatira is also known as the Church of Principalities. So it's related to one's principles, and it's also related to the heart and wind. So, and love, which is why the sin is to sleep around or practice sexual immorality with, those who don't value those true romantic connections. In essence, that's that. Going into, again, this stuff, sex, drugs, addictions, fear, that's all relating to Smyrna, which is kind of tied to the cage in the sense that you can think about it almost like when you let these things run rampant, these desires run rampant, it's essentially like having the demons like basically running around causing havoc, and they're almost, what is said in the passage of Smyrna. It said that in the passage of the church of Smyrna in Revelation 2, that some of you, the devil will cast some of you into prison, and you will be tried for 10 days, right? And essentially what it's referring to is these things when you're tested, basically, and you don't overcometh, you don't conquer, you are cast into prison, which means you're cut off from the spiritual connection of Source, the divinity of Source, the higher spiritual aspects of Source. You're cut off from that. You're cut off from the higher aspects of the divine, which again relates to all those churches, allowing the energy to flow, because, it's talked about in a lot of actually like spiritual practices and whatnot, that seed, sperm or cum is related to like vital life force energy, but it's spiritualized, it's etherized by one being in alignment with their principalities. So it's not just about not like like basically blowing your load, and keeping that within you, but it's about being in alignment with those spiritual principles, and essentially utilizing being in that alignment to spiritualize your body and spiritualize that essence, that vital life force, because it becomes the material substance of spiritual essence, which is why it can create life, why it's considered life force. So in relation to the cage, you can think of it like essentially either you are able to overcometh or conquer those demons, the adversary, and all these like desires, and basically put them in the cage, and essentially imprison them within these lower centers by overcoming those desires, or they put you in the cage because you let the desires control you. So this is the essence of Smyrna and what it means in that passage. So relating that back to what it's saying over here is, again, these are all the elements here, and this is tied to the lower astral, which is where all the entities and demons and stuff exist, and they can go to the higher planes of existence, like the mental plane, causal plane, celestial plane, etc., because this is like a spiritual purgatory where they're stuck and they can't go to the higher planes because they're obviously lower vibrating beings. So when you yourself are in alignment with your principalities, you go up to those energetic levels, and you essentially make your way out of that almost purgatory, or you transcend rather that dimension. So, which is why, like, we exist in 3D, angels and stuff like this. But when we are in alignment with those higher principalities, they cannot. You exercise your individuality as a soul being, and you have authority to rule over those aspects. But again, it's, do you have the willpower, which is the aspect of Pergamos, that fire in your soul, to overcome it and transcend them. Remember, flaming sword, demons are made from fire. They're smited or killed by fire. So that's that. So this is really the essence of what is talked about in Revelation. And relating to the moon, I'm not going to get into the sexes of it, but I just would like to say that there's typically an analogy where men are often referred to as stone, which relates to the like first dimension, and the earth element, and women are tied to like water, or the moon, because because it has to do with cycles, has to do with fluidity, and that's why, when a woman's pregnant and they're having a baby, it's called breaking the water, or their water breaks, because again, it's tied to water, it's tied to the moon, it's tied to cycles, which is why, again, women have cycles. The thing about this, and I'm not knocking any sex here, just to make this clear, but in some sense, certain, you can say a sex is more prone or vulnerable to these aspects of possession because of these factors of being tied to water. And the essence of this is also, it's kind of like, I don't want to use the phrase double-edged sword because that's tied to Pergamos, and we're talking about Smyrna here, but essentially, in some sense, it is like a two-sided thing, because women being tied to water and the moon are essentially, because of that nature, more spiritual, which is why women have always been depicted as more spiritual than men, right? Or more spiritually based. It's even said about, like, Shiva, for example, before enlightenment, he moved more like man. After enlightenment, he moved more like woman. This is why, because spirituality is deeply tied. It has to transcend this center, which is the natural instinct or energy of females. But it also means that if you're not awakened and you're a female, you might be more susceptible to basically this influence than men are, because of course we know water is more prone to change than earth is. This is where the analogies come from, of men being like stone, and not being emotional, and women being emotional and being like water, tied to the moon and cycles, etc., etc. Just to clarify as well, the cage is not on the moon. The cage is in hell. It's in the deepest parts of hell. So the only reason I put the moon here is because it's tied to Smyrna, which has overlapping qualities with the cage, such as temporal limbo, etc. And it's the place that can contain emotions, contain that powerful force of the adversary, because the adversary is very powerful compared to those demons, but he is also not as powerful as the divinity of the archangels. So specifically Michael, who is the strongest archangel. In essence, this is the basis of these parts of Revelation relating to the bottomless pit. So again, the apocalypse represents a state within yourself in which when the apocalypse happens, it means that you are not in alignment with those spiritual principles. The energy is going out of whack, and it's being expressed through these addictions and through desires, and not through higher alignment with source, divinity, or spirituality. And Buddha talked about this as the middle path, which is why I'm saying straight in terms of the energy flow. It's the middle path, because it's not forming sine waves where it's kind of erratic. It's straight, it's linear, the energy is being channeled upwards. So anyway, that's the basis of that. So when you overcome these factors, desires, you are essentially able to seal the adversary and or the demons, if you want to say, in the cage and keep those essentially imprisoned and overcome them and transcend them to rise to the spiritual planes of existence. And again, to reiterate, I'm not saying sex or even drugs or any of these things are bad. I'm saying the letting them take hold of you and possess you and become like desires and run rampant. That is what I'm saying is the negative aspect, which relates to the energy going out of whack. So in essence, that is, please excuse my brief pause. In essence though, that is the basis of it. When you overcome it, when you conquer it, and you keep your alignment straight and transcend that energy to the higher churches, you not only imprison the demons, but you walk the path of a spiritually awakened, conscious individual. So, in essence, remember all of these desires are natural, they're normal, they're something that you're meant to experience, but you're not meant to have them take hold on you. I have a saying actually about certain emotions. For example, like anger, right? I say I possess anger. I don't let anger possess me. So it's the same kind of like connotation here. You possess the ability to have sex. It's not sex that possesses you, right? But in the 21st century, we can see actually some of these things possessing large groups of individuals. So, just sum up, this is essentially the basis of what is meant in Revelation concerning the churches, concerning the cage, concerning the bottomless pit, concerning the first battle in heaven, concerning the Archangel Michael who seals the adversary or imprisons him in the bottomless pit, and the apocalypse, which is again just when that energy goes out of balance because it's not being channeled for higher spiritual development. In essence, this is what I have for you today on the Sword of Mercury. I am trying to include more triggers, or I should say I am including more triggers, but it's a work in progress. Sometimes I get so wrapped up in talking about the subject that I would just rather, explain further and, whisper and talk with you guys than actually, tapping and all this stuff or, making sounds. But let me know if you would like to see more triggers. Let me know what you thought of this concept. Let me know if you like seeing this kind of spiritual stuff. I encourage you guys to like and subscribe to help support the channel. It does make a big difference. I know you guys maybe might not think so, but it certainly does, and it encourages me to keep making these videos because you guys value them and comment back and give feedback. So in essence, like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I will leave all my links in the description below to my podcast Moonstruck. I will also link my Instagram. You can follow me at top_sorcerer. I will link all of my links in the description below. Let me know if you would like to see some more discussions on subjects such as these, and as I said before, like and subscribe. Leave a comment about what you found most insightful, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Snuggly dreams.